Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala rasulihil ameen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Dear brothers and sisters, we are talking about the zakat of business, and in the last video we talked about the ownership structures and also the meaning of ownership in Islamic jurisprudence. In this particular video, we will be looking at the assets that are liable for zakat in business. There are assets that are liable for zakat. We can call them zakatable, if that particular word is okay. So there are goods, there are assets that are liable for zakat, and there are assets that are not liable for zakat in Islamic jurisprudence. Now there is an argument, there is a position, at least from some people, who say that there is no such classification like zakatable assets and non-zakatable assets. Zakat will be levied on all forms of assets, irrespective of their structure, their composition, form, etc. Actually, this is a misrepresented and a mistaken position in the light of evidences from Quran and Sunnah. Because zakat is a farl ain, it's an obligatory ibadat on a Muslim in personal capacity. And as we know, all the ibadat in Islam, it is explained by the tradition of the Prophet, how Prophet taught them to us, what are the elaborate rules and regulations that are put in place with regard to these ibadat. For example, let us take prayer. Allah says in the Quran, Aqimus Salat, establish prayer. Now, if a person says that prayer is according to one's understanding, like it is okay to pray in any way, or a person say that as prayer is something that is commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is okay to pray throughout the day. Would that be a correct position? No, it will be a gross mistake on a person, on the part of a person to understand something like that. So zakat is also an ibadat, and the qawaid, the shart of zakat, the conditions attached to that, how it has to be levied, on what assets they are actually levied, and what are the rates of zakat to be applied to different classes of assets. All these have to be taught by the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What we are trying to say here is that it is not right to say that zakat is levied and it is applicable on all types of assets. There are assets on which zakat will be applicable, and there are assets on which zakat will not be applicable. Coming to the specific topic of discussion, that is zakat of business, what we need to understand is the same. That is, even in business, there are assets that are not subject to zakat, and there are assets that are subject to zakat. And we should understand this clearly. Now, we should also understand that when we say zakat of business, we are not referring to business as an activity, because zakat is not that is applicable to specific activities. If somebody is in a profession, somebody is doing some sort of a job like an engineer, a doctor, or lawyer, or a person is in business, somebody is doing agriculture, somebody is doing bodily works, that is doing physical work for his maisha. So all these refers to the different professions that we are referring to. These are not the sabab of zakat. The sabab of zakat, or the thing on which zakat is applicable, is specific wealth in specific quantities. Minimum threshold has to be reached, and that has to remain in the ownership of a Muslim for at least 1 year, except for in the case of agricultural produce, where the zakat is discharged on the day of harvesting. So all these details need to be understood specifically, and in terms of business of zakat of business, what we need to understand is that there are assets that are liable to zakat and there are assets that are not liable to zakat. For the purpose of understanding, let us classify the assets in business into three groups. Three groups of assets. The first group is that those assets which belong to the category of uh, assets that are held by a business for the purpose of conduction of business. That is, those assets, those materials in business, whether they are of a fixed nature or whether they are of a revenue nature, which are held in business for the purpose of running the business, for the purpose of facilitating the business. Examples would be land, building, packaging materials, machinery, computers, etc. These are not goods that are brought into a business for the purpose of trading or exchange. They are held in the business for the purpose of conducting business and facilitating business. So, the basic ruling in this regard is that these kind of assets which are not for exchange will not attract zakat, and it is fairly and strongly established in Islamic jurisprudence. The qaida regarding this is that al-malul mu'addu lil intifa'i la lil mu'awalati la zakata fihi. Al-malul mu'addu lil intifa'i la lil mu'awalati la zakata fihi. That is, goods, assets, wealth that are for use, that are for the purpose of use in business and not for exchange, does not attract zakat, or there is no zakat on that. So that is the first category of goods. The second category of goods are goods for trade, that is goods of exchange. We can call it stock or inventory, whatever terms we attribute to them. The purpose of goods is for exchange, there is zakat on that. So this will also include, if it is a production business, the raw materials that comes into the production process in the very basic form, and it goes through different stages of the production process. And at the time of zakat, when we are calculating zakat, whatever raw materials are there in basic form and whatever materials are there in working process and the finished goods that are ready for sale, all these will be collectively taken as inventory. So the third type of assets in a business would be nuqud, cash and cash equivalents. Cash in bank, cash in impress cash in business, like in your counters, and that is circulating in the business. Cash receivables, that is, which can be converted into cash within a short period of time. All these collectively will refer to cash and cash equivalents and will be classified as nuqud. What is the evidence that cash and cash equivalents in business will be subjected to zakat is that Allah's Prophet did command zakat on gold and silver. That is, he asked people to pay their zakat on gold and silver, and gold and silver were the nuqud at that time, and they were units of exchange, they were measure of value, and they were store of value. That was the currency at that time, and we have fiat currency these days. So fiat currency is referred to as nuqud al-hukmi, that is constructive currency. So they stand in the place of gold and silver, which were used for exchange during those times, and that will attract the zakat. So among the three types of assets, three types of materials, three types of wealth that would be present in any business, the first asset, the first class of asset, that is those assets that are held in a business for making it convenient for running the business, for the purpose of facilitating the business and making the business functional, there will be no zakat on them, and that is strongly established in Islamic jurisprudence. The second type of assets will be the trade offers, which are called technically urul at-tijara. This I missed during explaining that they are technically called urul at-tijarat, and they are trade offers or the subject matter of trade, inventory or stock of trade, and all forms of them will be subject to zakat, and whatever cash and cash equivalents are held in the business will also be subject to zakat. So there are basically two classes of things that will be subject to zakat in business. They are goods of trade and they are cash and cash equivalents. Now, in the coming videos, inshallah, we will go in detail into the process of calculation of zakat and what other things need to be considered while we are assessing the zakat in business. Inshallah, we will meet soon in further videos. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.